Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you'd put your life in their hands without a second thought? That's how I felt about Uncle Marcus. He wasn't just my uncle. He was my hero, my mentor, the man who stepped in when my father couldn't. But sometimes, the people we trust the most are the ones who teach us the harshest lessons about life. My name is Daniel, and I need to tell you this story because keeping it inside feels like carrying a mountain on my chest. It started 3 years ago, right after my 18th birthday. My dad had passed away when I was 7, leaving just me and Mom to figure out life together. We managed okay for a while, but when I turned 15, Mom got sick, really sick. The kind of sick where doctors use big words and speak in hushed tones. Uncle Marcus appeared in our lives like an angel during those dark days. He was Dad's younger brother, successful, charming, always dressed in crisp suits that made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine. While Dad had been a simple mechanic who came home with grease under his fingernails, Marcus had made it big in real estate. He owned properties all over the city, drove a black Mercedes, and had this way of walking into a room that made everyone notice. "Danny boy," he'd say, ruffling my hair even though I was taller than him by then, "family takes care of family. That's what your dad would want." He paid for Mom's treatments, every single bill. When the insurance ran out, Marcus didn't even blink. He moved us from our cramped apartment to a nice house in the suburbs, saying the fresh air would be good for Mom's recovery. He hired a nurse to help during the day while I was at school. He even set up a college fund for me, promising that education would be my ticket to a better life. Mom would cry sometimes, overwhelmed by his generosity. "Marcus, this is too much," she'd whisper, her thin hands trembling as she held the latest receipt he'd covered. "Helen, your family," he'd respond, his voice warm and reassuring. "My brother would have done the same for my family. This is what we do." I worshipped him. While other kids complained about their relatives, I'd brag about Uncle Marcus. He taught me things Dad never had the chance to: how to tie a tie properly, how to shake hands with confidence, how to look someone in the eye when you speak. On weekends, he'd take me to his office, showing me spreadsheets and contracts, explaining how business worked. "You're smart, Danny," he'd tell me, "smarter than I was at your age. You could run this whole operation someday if you wanted." Those words made me feel 10 feet tall. Someone believed in me, saw potential in me. After years of watching Mom struggle, of feeling helpless and small, Uncle Marcus made me feel like I could conquer the world. When I turned 18, Mom was in remission. The doctors called it a miracle, but I knew the real miracle was Uncle Marcus and his unwavering support. That's when he made me an offer that seemed too good to be true. "Danny, I want you to come work for me this summer before college starts," he said over dinner one night. We were at his favorite steakhouse, the kind of place where they bring you warm towels before the meal. "Not just filing papers or getting coffee. Real work. I'll teach you the business from the ground up." Mom beamed across the table, her face finally having regained some color after years of looking pale and drawn. "That's wonderful, Marcus. Such an opportunity for Daniel." I was ecstatic. My friends were all getting minimum wage jobs at fast food places or retail stores, but I was going to learn from a master. Uncle Marcus had built his empire from nothing, just like those success stories you read about online, and he was going to teach me everything. The first day at his office, I felt like I was walking into my future. The building was all glass and steel, reaching toward the sky like it was trying to grab the clouds. His office was on the top floor, with windows that showed the entire city spread out below like a map of possibilities. "First lesson, Danny," he said, standing beside me at those windows. "Everything you see out there, every building, every house, every piece of land, it all has value, but the real skill is seeing the value before everyone else does." He started me with simple tasks: reviewing contracts, checking property listings, accompanying him to meetings. I soaked it all up like a sponge, taking notes, asking questions. He was patient, explaining things multiple times if I didn't understand. He introduced me to his business partners as his protege, his nephew who was going to be somebody someday. There was this one property he was particularly excited about, an old warehouse district on the east side of the city. Most people saw rundown buildings and empty lots, but Marcus saw potential. "In 5 years, Danny, this area will be the hottest real estate in the city," he explained, spreading blueprints across his desk. "New highway access is coming. Tech companies are looking for cheap space to expand. We buy now while everyone thinks it's worthless and will make a fortune." He needed investors for the project, and that's where things started to get complicated. One evening, about a month into my summer job, he called me into his office after everyone else had left. "Danny, I need to talk to you about something important," he said, his usual confident demeanor replaced with something more serious. "This warehouse project, it's bigger than anything I've done before. The return will be massive, but I need more capital to secure the properties." I nodded, trying to look professional and understanding, even though high finance was still mostly a mystery to me. "Your mom," he continued, and my attention sharpened. "When your dad died, he had a life insurance policy. Your mom never told you the full amount, did she?" I shook my head. Mom had always been vague about money, saying we had enough to get by and that I shouldn't worry about it. "It was substantial, Danny. She invested most of it, keeping it safe for your future. For college, for getting married someday, for buying a house. It's in a trust that you'll gain access to when you turn 21. This was news to me. Mom had mentioned some savings for college, but I'd assumed it was a few $1,000s, maybe 10,000 at most. From the way Marcus was talking, it sounded like much more. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "About $300,000, he said, and I nearly fell out of my chair. Your dad was smarter than he let on. He wanted to make sure you and your mom would be okay if anything happened to him." $300,000. The number bounced around in my head like a pinball. That was more money than I could even imagine. "Now, Danny, I'm not asking you to do anything with that money," Marcus said quickly, holding up his hands. "It's yours for your future, but there's another option I want you to consider." He pulled out a folder thick with documents and projections. "If you were to invest that money in this warehouse project, I can guarantee you'd triple it within 3 years, maybe even quadruple it. Instead of 300,000 for your future, you'd have over 1 million. You'd be set for life before you even graduate college." The numbers made my head spin. $1 million at 21 years old. I could take care of Mom forever with that kind of money. Pay for her medications, make sure she never had to worry about bills again. "But I can't access it until I'm 21, I said, confused about why he was telling me this now. "True," Marcus agreed, "but your mom can. As the trustee, she has the power to release the funds early for specific purposes, education, medical emergencies, or investment opportunities that would significantly benefit your future." He must have seen the uncertainty on my face because he leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Danny, I'm not pressuring you. This is entirely your decision. I just wanted you to know about this opportunity because you're family, and I want to see you succeed. Think about it, talk to your mom if you want." There's no rush. But there was a rush, as I'd learn later. The property deals needed to be closed within weeks, and other investors were circling. Marcus never said it directly, but I could feel the urgency in his voice during our meetings, see it in the way he checked his phone constantly. I went home that night with my mind racing. Mom was in the kitchen humming while she cooked dinner, something she hadn't done in years. She looked healthy, happy, alive. Uncle Marcus had given us that. How could I not trust him with this? "Mom," I started carefully as we ate. "Uncle Marcus told me about Dad's life insurance money." She stopped mid-chew, her fork suspended in the air. "He did. He said it's in a trust for me. $300,000. Mom set down her fork carefully, her face unreadable. "That money is for your future, Daniel. Your father wanted to make sure you'd have opportunities he never had. But what if there was a way to make it grow? To turn it into enough money that neither of us would ever have to worry again?" She studied my face for a long moment. "This is about Marcus's warehouse project, isn't it?" I nodded, surprised she knew about it. "He told you." "He mentioned it," she said slowly. "Daniel, your uncle has been incredibly generous to us, but that money, it's the last gift your father could give you." "I know," I said quickly. "But Dad would want us to be smart with it, right? And Uncle Marcus hasn't steered us wrong yet. Look at everything he's done for us." We talked late into the night. Mom had reservations, worried about the risk. But I was 18, full of confidence and trust in the uncle who'd saved our lives. I showed her the projections Marcus had given me, the contracts from other successful projects he'd completed. The evidence seemed overwhelming. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It took 2 weeks of discussions, but eventually, Mom agreed. Not because she was completely convinced, but because she trusted my judgment, and more importantly, because she trusted Marcus. He was family, he'd been there when we needed him most. The day we went to the bank to arrange the transfer, Marcus was like a kid on Christmas morning. He hugged Mom, then me, his eyes actually tearing up. "You won't regret this," he promised. "I'm going to make sure Danny's future is secured. This is what family does for each other." The paperwork was complex, full of legal jargon that made my head hurt. But Marcus walked us through everything, explaining each clause, each provision. He even insisted on adding a document that guaranteed my investment would be returned first before any other investors if something went wrong. "Not that anything will go wrong," he said with his confident smile, "but I want you both to feel completely secure." Mom signed with a shaking hand. I signed with excitement. $300,000 moved from the trust into Marcus's business account for the warehouse project. We celebrated that night at the same steakhouse, Marcus ordering champagne even though I was too young to drink. To family, he toasted with his glass of champagne while I held up my soda. To trust, to opportunity, and to Danny's bright future. For the next few weeks, everything seemed perfect. Marcus showed me the properties he was buying, walked me through the renovation plans. He introduced me to architects and contractors, all of whom spoke about the project with enthusiasm. I felt like I was part of something big, something important, but then small things started to feel off. Marcus began missing our scheduled meetings, saying urgent business had come up. When I'd visit the warehouse properties, expecting to see construction beginning, they looked the same as before, abandoned and empty. When I asked about it, Marcus said there were permit delays, typical bureaucratic red tape. "Don't worry, Danny boy," he'd say, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. "These things take time. Rome wasn't built in a day." Mom started noticing, too. Marcus stopped coming by for dinner, stopped calling to check on her health. When we did see him, he seemed distracted, constantly on his phone, his face tight with stress. One evening, about 2 months after we'd invested the money, I decided to surprise Marcus at his office. I wanted to show him I was taking initiative, maybe help with whatever was stressing him out. But when I got there, the building was dark. Not just his office, the entire floor his company occupied was empty. I called his cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I tried his home number, disconnected. Panic started creeping up my spine like cold fingers. I drove to his house, the beautiful colonial in the best part of town. There was a for sale sign in the front yard. The windows were dark, and when I peered through them, I could see that all the furniture was gone. My hands shaking, I called Mom. "Have you heard from Uncle Marcus?" "Not for a few days," she said, and I could hear worry creeping into her voice. "Daniel, what's wrong?" I didn't want to scare her, not when her health was still fragile. "Nothing, just couldn't reach him. I'll keep trying." But I knew, deep in my gut, I knew something was terribly wrong. I spent the next day trying to track down Marcus's business partners, the ones he'd introduced me to. The first 2 numbers I called were disconnected. The third person answered but claimed they'd never heard of Marcus or his company. The architects and contractors I'd met, they said Marcus had hired them for initial consultations but never followed through with actual contracts. It was like Marcus had vanished into thin air, taking our $300,000 with him. I drove to the warehouse properties, hoping against hope that I'd find some sign of the development he'd promised. But they were exactly as they'd been months ago, empty, abandoned, with no sign that anyone had plans for them. When I checked the city records online, the properties weren't even registered under Marcus's name or his company. They belonged to a corporation I'd never heard of. The truth hit me like a freight train. There was no warehouse project. There had never been a warehouse project. It was all an elaborate lie, and we'd fallen for it completely. I sat in my car outside one of those empty warehouses and called Marcus's number again and again, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. "Uncle Marcus, please call me back. I'm at the warehouse. I don't understand what's happening. Please just talk to me. We're family. You said family takes care of family." But he never called back. When I finally went home that night, I found Mom in the living room, her face pale, holding a letter. Her hands were shaking so badly the paper rustled like leaves in the wind. "It's from the bank," she whispered. "The check we wrote to Marcus, it's been cashed. The money's gone, Daniel, all of it." I took the letter from her, reading it 3 times as if the words might change, but they remained the same. $300,000 withdrawn and transferred to an offshore account. The bank had no way to recover it. Mom started to cry, and not the gentle tears of gratitude she'd shed when Marcus helped us. These were broken sobs, the kind that come from realizing you've been betrayed by someone you loved. Your father's money, she gasped between sobs. The last thing he could give you, and I let Marcus take it. I signed those papers. I trusted him. I held her while she cried, my own tears falling silently. But it wasn't the money that hurt the most. It was the betrayal. The man who'd stepped up when Dad died, who'd paid for Mom's treatment, who'd made me feel special and capable and loved. He'd been planning this all along. I went through everything with a fine-tooth comb after that. Every document Marcus had given us, every contract, every projection. It was all fake, professionally done, but fake. The business partners he'd introduced me to were actors he'd hired. The entire summer of teaching me the business was just an elaborate setup to gain our complete trust. But the cruelest revelation came when I dug deeper into Mom's medical bills. The insurance hadn't run out when Marcus started paying. There had been coverage all along. He'd intercepted the statements, made us believe we were desperate and dependent on him. The house he'd moved us to, he'd owned it already, inherited from a deceased aunt. It hadn't cost him anything to let us live there. Everything had been calculated to make us trust him completely, to make us feel so indebted that when he finally asked for something, we couldn't say no. The weeks after discovering Marcus's betrayal blurred together like watercolors in the rain. Mom stopped eating properly. She'd sit at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. The light that had returned to her eyes during her remission flickered and dimmed. It wasn't the cancer killing her this time, it was the shame. I should have known, she'd whisper to herself when she thought I wasn't listening. What kind of mother gives away her child's future? I tried telling her it wasn't her fault, that Marcus had fooled us both, but words felt hollow against the weight of what had happened. I filed a police report, but the detective assigned to our case, a tired-looking man named Rodriguez, didn't give us much hope. These kinds of family fraud cases are the hardest to prosecute, he explained, flipping through the documents I'd brought. He was smart, everything you signed was technically legal. You willingly gave him the money for an investment, proving it was fraud when he actually did buy some properties, even if not the ones he showed you. That's nearly impossible. But he lied to us, I protested. The whole thing was a scam. Rodriguez nodded sympathetically. I believe you, son, but believing and proving in court are two different things, and even if we could prove it, he's probably long gone by now. These types usually are. I refused to give up that easily. I spent every moment I wasn't at my part-time job, a real minimum wage position at a hardware store, the kind my friends had gotten, trying to track down Marcus. I called relatives, searched social media, even hired a cheap private investigator with what little money I'd saved from my summer working for Marcus. Every lead went nowhere. It was like he'd been erased from existence. 3 months after Marcus disappeared, I found out the house we were living in was being foreclosed. He'd taken out loans against it before he vanished, and since we had no legal claim to it, we had 30 days to leave. Mom's reaction when I told her was the worst part. She didn't cry or rage, she just nodded like she'd been expecting more bad news. We moved back to a small apartment, similar to the one we'd lived in before Marcus's help. I had to defer college, the acceptance letter to State University sitting unopened in a drawer because even with financial aid, we couldn't afford it now. Mom went back to work despite still being weak from her treatments, taking shifts at a grocery store that left her exhausted and pale. But the story doesn't end there. It couldn't, because life has a way of twisting the knife when you think you've already bled all you can. 6 months after Marcus vanished, I was working late at the hardware store, doing inventory in the back when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, too many debt collectors had been calling lately, but something made me pick up. Daniel, the voice was weak, raspy, but unmistakable. Uncle Marcus. My blood turned to ice, then fire. You son of a... Please, Danny, please just listen, he interrupted, and something in his voice made me pause. He sounded different, broken. I'm dying. Good, I spat, meaning it with every fiber of my being. I'm in Sacred Heart Hospital, room 415. I know you hate me, you have every right to, but please, I need to see you. I need to explain, not for my sake, for yours and your mother's. Explain. Explain how you stole everything from us, how you betrayed the only family you had left. Yes, he said simply, and to give you something important. Please, Danny, I have maybe a week left. The cancer, it's everywhere now. Cancer. The word hit me like a slap. The irony was too cruel to be real. You're lying, I said. This is another scam. Room 415, he repeated. Check for yourself. I'm listed under my real name, Marcus Sullivan. He hung up before I could respond. I stood there in the stockroom, my phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. Every rational part of me said to ignore him, that this was just another manipulation. But the part of me that still remembered the uncle who'd taught me to tie a tie, who'd called me Danny Boy, who'd made me feel special, that part wouldn't let it go. I didn't tell Mom. She was finally starting to eat again, starting to smile occasionally. I couldn't risk breaking her again, but the next day I drove to Sacred Heart Hospital. At the information desk, I asked for Marcus Sullivan, half expecting them to say no one by that name was there. Room 415, the volunteer said cheerfully. Oncology ward. Elevators are to your right. The walk to his room felt like walking through quicksand. Each step was a battle between turning back and moving forward. When I reached room 415, I stood outside for a full minute before pushing open the door. The man in the bed looked nothing like Uncle Marcus. This person was skeletal, his skin gray and hanging loose on his bones. The expensive suits had been replaced by a hospital gown that made him look small and vulnerable. But the eyes, those were still Marcus's eyes, though they'd lost their confident sparkle. "Danny," he breathed, and his face crumpled. "You came." "I don't know why," I said, staying near the door. "I do," he said. "Because despite everything, you're a good person, better than I ever was." I wanted to leave right then, but something kept me rooted to the spot. Maybe it was the monitors beeping around him, the IV drips, the unmistakable smell of death that hung in the air. This wasn't a con. Marcus was really dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, he said, following my gaze to the medical equipment. Started about 18 months ago, right before I began planning. "Everything. You knew you were sick when you were helping Mom." The question came out before I could stop it. He nodded slowly. "I found out the week after I heard about Helen's diagnosis. Funny, isn't it? I went to the doctor for a regular checkup, feeling perfectly healthy, and walked out with a death sentence. 2 months to live, they said, maybe 6 with treatment. But that was 18 months ago. I got lucky. Or unlucky, depending on how you look at it. Experimental treatment gave me more time I used to." He trailed off, unable to finish. "To con us, I finished for him. To secure my legacy," he corrected, then laughed bitterly. "God, even now I'm trying to justify it. You want to know the truth, Danny, the real, ugly truth." I moved closer despite myself, sitting in the visitor's chair beside his bed. "I was broke," he admitted, "completely, utterly broke. The real estate empire I bragged about, gone. Lost it all in bad investments 5 years ago. I'd been living on credit, keeping up appearances, robbing Peter to pay Paul. The Mercedes was leased. The suits were all I had left from the good times. Even the office you came to, I was subletting it illegally from a friend. My mind reeled, but the money you spent on Mom's treatments. Credit cards. Loans from people you don't want to owe money to. I figured I'd be dead before they came collecting." He coughed, a wet, horrible sound. "When I found out about your father's life insurance, I saw it as a sign. A way to get back on my feet, to have something to leave behind besides debt and shame. So you decided to steal from your brother's widow and son. I told myself I was going to invest it, really invest it. Make it grow like I promised." His eyes closed, tears leaking from the corners. "But the moment that money hit my account, my creditors were on it like vultures. $300,000, and it was gone in days. Debts paid, loans settled, and barely enough left over to run." The room felt airless. I wanted to rage at him, to grab his fragile shoulders and shake him, but he looked so pathetic lying there that all I felt was empty. "Why tell me this?" I asked. "Why not just die with your secret?" "Because there's more," he said, reaching for something on his bedside table. His hand shook so badly he could barely grasp the envelope he was reaching for. "This came 2 weeks ago." I took the envelope, recognizing the official seal of a law firm. Inside was a document that made no sense at first. A life insurance policy. Marcus's life insurance policy. "I took it out years ago, back when I still had money," he explained. "Forgot about it, honestly. Thought I'd lost it along with everything else. But apparently I'd paid it up for 20 years in advance during my successful days. It's been sitting there, accumulating value." I looked at the beneficiary line. Helen and Daniel Morrison. Our names, the policy value, $500,000. "I don't understand," I said, the paper trembling in my hands. "I never changed the beneficiaries," Marcus said, "even after I decided to do what I did. Some part of me, maybe the part that remembered being your Uncle Marcus instead of a desperate, dying con man, couldn't bring myself to change it. This has to be fake, I said. Another con. Call the insurance company, the number's right there, policy numbers on the top of the page. He closed his eyes. I'm going to die, Danny, within days, according to the doctors. When I do, you and your mother will receive $500,000, more than I stole from you. I did call, right there in his hospital room. I called the insurance company and verified everything. It was real. The policy was real, we were the beneficiaries, and it would pay out upon Marcus's death. Why? I asked after I hung up. Why not change it and leave the money to someone else? Why give it to us after everything? Marcus was quiet for so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Because I loved you both. I know that sounds insane after what I did, but it's true. Those years after your father died, when I was still successful, being part of your lives was the only real happiness I had. Teaching you things, watching you grow up, seeing Helen get strong again, it was like having the family I never made for myself. He opened his eyes, looking directly at me. When I got sick and lost everything, I became someone else, someone desperate and cruel. But those moments with you and your mother, before I became a monster, those were real. The teaching, the caring, the love. That was the real Marcus, the one your father would have recognized. You want forgiveness, I said. It wasn't a question. No, he said firmly. I don't deserve forgiveness. What I did is unforgivable. I just wanted you to know that it wasn't all a lie. The uncle who loved you, who wanted the best for you, he existed before the cancer, and the bankruptcy turned him into someone else. We sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the beeping of machines and Marcus's labored breathing. Finally, I stood to leave. Danny, he called as I reached the door. Your mother, don't tell her about the insurance until after. Let her hate me cleanly. It's easier than complicated feelings. Those were the last words Uncle Marcus ever said to me. He died 3 days later, alone in that hospital room. I was at work when I got the call. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief or sadness or anger. I just felt empty. The insurance money came through a month later. True to his word, it was real, $500,000 deposited into an account in my and Mom's names. When I finally told her, showing her the check, she broke down completely. Not tears of joy or tears of sorrow, but something more complex, the tears of someone trying to reconcile love and betrayal, gratitude and anger. He gave it back, she kept saying. He gave it back. But he hadn't, not really. He'd given us different money, accompanied by a different kind of burden. The burden of knowing that the man who'd betrayed us had also loved us, that the villain in our story had once been a hero and maybe had tried to be again at the end. We used some of the money to pay off debts to get back on stable ground. I enrolled in college studying business, not because Uncle Marcus had wanted me to, but because I'd discovered I was actually good at it. Mom retired from the grocery store, her health too fragile for those long shifts. We bought a small house, nothing fancy but ours, but the money felt heavy, weighted with too much history. So we did something Uncle Marcus never would have expected. We took half of it and created a foundation for families dealing with cancer. Families who were vulnerable, desperate, the kind of people someone might take advantage of. We called it the Second Chance Foundation, not after Marcus's second chance, but after ours. The foundation's first grant went to a single father whose daughter had leukemia. He'd been about to take out a predatory loan to pay for treatment. We covered the costs instead, no strings attached. Watching his face when we told him, the relief, the gratitude, the sudden absence of that desperate look I'd seen in Marcus's eyes, it felt like something breaking free in my chest. Mom and I never fully reconciled what Marcus did to us. How could we? He'd violated the most sacred trust, used our love against us. But we also couldn't forget the man who'd sat by Mom's hospital bed during her chemotherapy, reading her favorite books aloud when she was too weak to hold them herself. The man who taught me to shake hands with confidence and look the world in the eye. People aren't simple. They're not pure heroes or villains, no matter how much easier that would make life. Uncle Marcus was a man who loved us, who saved us, who betrayed us, and who, in his twisted way, tried to make amends. He was family, complicated, flawed, broken family. I think about him sometimes, especially when I'm reviewing grant applications for the foundation. I see his desperation in these family stories, but also his love, the fierce, protective love that makes people do terrible and wonderful things. I've learned to recognize the signs now, the difference between someone who needs help and someone who's planning to help themselves to others' generosity. But mostly, I think about that summer when I was 18, working in his office, feeling like I was on top of the world. Those moments were real even if they were built on a foundation of lies. The lessons he taught me were real even if he didn't follow them himself. The love was real, even tangled up with betrayal. Mom passed away last year. The cancer came back as we'd always feared it might, but this time we were prepared. We had good insurance, the best doctors, and most importantly, time together without financial stress. In her final weeks, she talked about Marcus often. He was sick too, she said one evening, the sunset painting her hospital room golden. Not just the cancer, something in his soul was sick. But Danny, I remember the man who stood up at our wedding, who promised your father he'd always look after us if needed. That man was real too. She made me promise something before she died. Don't carry hate, Daniel. It's too heavy and life's too short. What Marcus did was wrong, unforgivable maybe, but holding on to that anger will poison you just like the cancer poisoned him. Use what happened to help others to be better. That's the best revenge and the best memorial. So that's what I've done. The Second Chance Foundation has helped dozens of families now. We've prevented foreclosures, paid for treatments, kept families together during their darkest hours. Every family we help feels like we're rewriting our own story, choosing a different ending. I keep a photo in my office at the foundation. It's from my 16th birthday, 2 years before everything fell apart. Mom, Marcus, and I are at a restaurant, laughing at something. Marcus has his arm around my shoulders and Mom's smiling wider than I'd seen in years. We look happy. We look like a family. Sometimes volunteers ask about the photo, about who the man is. I tell them the truth. He's my Uncle Marcus, who taught me everything I know about business and betrayal, about trust and its consequences, about the complicated nature of love and family. He's the reason this foundation exists, though not in the way he might have expected. The hardest truth I've learned is that you can hate someone's actions while still loving who they were, who they could have been. You can be grateful for the good they brought into your life while condemning the harm they caused. You can accept that people are capable of both tremendous kindness and terrible cruelty, sometimes within the same heart. Uncle Marcus trusted me with his confession, his insurance policy, his complicated legacy. I trusted him with my future, my mother's health, my father's last gift to us. We both betrayed and honored that trust in different ways. That's the messy, painful, beautiful truth about family. We hurt each other and heal each other, often at the same time. Every time I approve a grant, every time I see a family's relief when they realize they're going to be okay, I think about trust. How fragile it is, how precious, how it can be weaponized or honored. I think about Uncle Marcus, dying alone in that hospital room, trying to make amends the only way he knew how. I think about Mom, choosing to forgive not for his sake but for ours. And I think about Dad, who died when I was 7 but somehow saw all of this coming. The life insurance policy he left wasn't just money, it was a test, a lesson, a gift that revealed who people really were. In losing it, we learned about betrayal. In receiving Marcus's policy, we learned about redemption. In giving it away through the foundation, we learned about purpose, the warehouse district Marcus had promised to develop. It did become valuable, just like he'd predicted. 5 years later, it's now filled with tech companies and trendy apartments. Someone else made the fortune he'd dreamed of. Sometimes I drive through there, looking at what might have been. But I don't feel regret anymore. That money was never really ours. It was bait for a trap we couldn't see coming. What was ours was the lesson, the growth, the understanding that came from surviving betrayal and choosing something better. What was ours was the chance to prevent other families from experiencing what we did. What was ours was the complicated love of a flawed man who died trying to make amends. Last month, I got a call from Rodriguez, the detective who'd handled our case years ago. He was retiring and wanted to let me know that Marcus Sullivan had never existed, at least not officially. The man we'd known as Uncle Marcus had changed his name years ago, running from other debts, other failures. Even his relationship to my father was complicated, half-brother, same mother, different fathers, a family connection that was both real and constructed. Thought you should know, Rodriguez said, in case it helps with closure. But it didn't change anything. Uncle Marcus, or whoever he really was, had been family when we needed family. He'd been a monster when desperation drove him to it. He'd been human, terribly and beautifully human, in all the ways that matter. The Second Chance Foundation's mission statement, which hangs in our small office, reads, "Everyone deserves a second chance." Not all second chances look the same. Sometimes the best second chance is the one you give someone else. Marcus never got his second chance, not really. The insurance money wasn't redemption, you can't buy forgiveness. But in his twisted, broken way, he gave us ours. A second chance to rebuild, to trust again, to help others. A second chance to understand that family isn't about blood or even trust, it's about choosing to love people despite their failures, to honor the good while acknowledging the bad. Some nights when I'm working late at the foundation, I catch myself using phrases Marcus taught me. See the value before everyone else does. Family takes care of family. Look for the opportunity in every crisis. He was a con man, a thief, a betrayer. He was also a teacher, a protector, a man who loved us imperfectly but genuinely. I don't forgive him. Mom was right that some things are unforgivable, but I understand him. I understand the fear of dying with nothing to show for your life, the desperation that makes good people do terrible things, the weight of trying to be someone's hero when you can barely save yourself. That understanding doesn't excuse what he did, but it's taught me to see the warning signs in others, to recognize when someone's drowning and might pull others down with them. It's made me better at what I do, more compassionate but also more careful. Uncle Marcus taught me about trust by breaking it, about family by betraying it, about love by corrupting it. Those aren't the lessons he meant to teach when he was showing me spreadsheets and property values, but they're the ones that stuck, the ones that shaped who I became. In trying to steal my future, he accidentally gave me purpose. In breaking my trust, he taught me how to rebuild it stronger. The last time I visited his grave, a simple marker in a city cemetery, paid for by the state, I left a photo from that birthday dinner, not for him but for me. A reminder that people are complex, that love and betrayal can exist in the same heart, that sometimes the best thing you can do with a painful legacy is transform it into something helpful. I still call him Uncle Marcus when I think about him, not because he deserved the title, but because that's who he was in our story. The uncle who saved us, who betrayed us, who died trying to balance the scales. The uncle who taught me that trust isn't just about choosing who to believe in, it's about understanding why people become unworthy of belief and choosing to be different. The families we help through the foundation often ask how we started, why we chose this mission. I tell them it's because we understand what it's like to be vulnerable, to have someone take advantage of that vulnerability, and to survive it. I don't tell them about Marcus specifically, that's a burden they don't need to carry. But his ghost is in every grant we give, every family we protect, every second chance we provide. Maybe that's his real legacy, not the money he stole or the money he left, but the understanding that grew from both. The recognition that desperation can make monsters of anyone, that love doesn't always look like kindness, that sometimes the best thing you can do with a broken trust is to build something better from the pieces. Uncle Marcus trusted me with his death, his confession, his complicated attempt at amends. I've chosen to honor that trust not by forgiving him, but by making sure his story serves a purpose. Every family we help is proof that his betrayal didn't win, that trust can be rebuilt, that second chances, even messy, imperfect ones, can create something beautiful. He was right about one thing during that summer when I was 18. I was smart, smarter than he was at that age, smart enough to survive what he did to us, smart enough to transform poison into medicine, smart enough to understand that the uncle who loved me and the uncle who betrayed me were the same person, and that both versions of him shaped who I became. The trust he broke will never fully heal. There's still a part of me that flinches when someone seems too generous, too helpful, too good to be true. But alongside that wariness lives something else, a determination to be the person he pretended to be, to actually help families without hidden motives, to be the uncle to others that I thought I had. In the end, that's the most human response to betrayal, not forgiveness or revenge, but transformation. Taking the worst thing that happened to you and alchemizing it into something useful for others. Uncle Marcus trusted his schemes, his lies, his desperate plans. I've learned to trust in something different, the possibility of making meaning from pain, purpose from betrayal, hope from the ruins of broken trust. The story I started by telling you about trusting someone completely, that's only half true now. I did trust Uncle Marcus completely, and he did betray that trust completely. But what happened next, what's still happening, isn't about him anymore. It's about what we choose to do when trust is broken, how we rebuild not the same trust but something different, something more complex and more honest. Uncle Marcus is gone, but his lessons remain. Not the lessons about real estate or business, but the inadvertent lessons about human nature, about the prices we pay for trust, about the strange ways love and betrayal intertwine. He taught me that family can hurt you worse than strangers ever could, but also that understanding why they hurt you is the beginning of healing. Every day at the foundation, I work to be someone worthy of trust. Not perfect, not pure, but honest about my imperfections. The families we help don't know about Marcus, but he's there in every interaction, a cautionary tale and a complicated grace, a reminder of what happens when desperation wins and what's possible when it doesn't. That's the story of how I trusted my uncle and what happened next. It broke me, yes, broke my innocence, my simple understanding of good and evil, my belief that love always protects. But from those broken pieces came something unexpected, not healing exactly, but growth. Not forgiveness, but understanding. Not trust restored, but trust transformed into something more careful and more valuable. Uncle Marcus wanted to leave a legacy. He did, just not the one he intended. His legacy lives in every family we protect from predators like him, every second chance we give that doesn't come with hidden costs, every moment we choose to help without expectation of return. He became, in death, the cautionary tale that makes our better story possible. Sometimes I wonder what he'd think if he could see what we've built from the ashes of what he burned. I think he'd be proud, and I think that pride would be both deserved and unearned. Deserved because we did something good with something bad, unearned because he doesn't get to claim credit for who we became despite him. The truth about trust is that once it's broken, it never quite returns to its original shape. But sometimes what it becomes is stronger, more nuanced, more valuable than blind faith ever was. Uncle Marcus taught me that trust should be earned, verified, and still held lightly. He taught me that love and betrayal can coexist, that people are capable of both tremendous good and terrible harm, that the best response to being broken is to help others avoid the same fate. That's his real legacy, not the money he stole or the money he left, but the wisdom that came from surviving him. Every time I say, family takes care of family, now, I mean it differently than he did. I mean that family protects each other from people like him. Family tells the hard truths. Family loves you enough to be honest about their limits, their failures, their potential for harm. The uncle I trusted died long before Marcus's body gave out. Maybe he died when the cancer diagnosis came, or when the bankruptcy hit, or maybe he'd been dying slowly for years before that. But the uncle who betrayed us gave us something too, the gift of hard-won wisdom, the opportunity to help others, the complex understanding that makes us human.